Fidelity is getting a really bad rap, so let's talk about it. Yes, fidelity has become the F word in education, so let's talk about it. School psychologists love fidelity data because we love data and we love to be able to have information that tells us how things are going. Fidelity data has become one of those critical pieces to us because we're so concerned about how students are growing, how students are learning, how their social emotional status and behavior is changing. And we know that improvement, growth, trajectories changing in the direction we want aren't going to happen unless those really strong practices are put in place the way they're designed to be put in place with integrity, our fidelity. So let's think about this. Why has fidelity gotten such a bad rap? As school psychologists, we love it because it tells us to the degree to which an evidence based practice, a curriculum, a program, strategies have been used to the extent that we know that they're supposed to get those desired outcomes that we're all putting them in place to achieve. So it's our metric, it's our indicator of do we expect to see the changes that our goals or outcomes that we're all striving for, or do we not because something wasn't done? Are we expected to see our temperature or fever come down if we haven't taken Tylenol, Advil, whatever fever reducer we need? We need to know, did we do what we said we were going to do? Was instruction, were the practices delivered as they were supposed to be done? We need to know that. Fidelity lets us know whether our outcomes are expected or not. And if we get outcomes but something wasn't done as the way it was, there might be something really cool about the way it was done that will help us to be able to make those practices a little bit more generalized. So let's peel it back. Fidelity is how well someone has done what they're supposed to be doing. So just think about that. We are looking at how someone did something, how someone delivered a practice or a program. So when people say it's just about it's accountability, you're evaluating me, in essence, yeah, that's there, but it's not for that intent. It's not to be able to, whether you get a promotion, whether you get a pay. It is, and here is the key piece that I hope that everyone hears. It is answering the question of it was this practice, was this program, was this strategy feasible to be delivered in the environment in which we are trying to set it up and establish it and implement it. So fidelity data is there to say, is this feasible? Or what more do we need to do to support you to be able to make and use this practice or this program in the environment in which it's supposed to be delivered now? Remember, always bring it back to that. When we were talking about collecting fidelity data, talk to everyone before we go out to collect those fidelity data, before we ask someone to do a self checklist, because it does feel evaluative, and it's not evaluative of that person, it's evaluative of how well we've set that person up to be able to do what we are asking of them, how well the environment is conducive to doing that. So if we set that stage to be able to say these data that we are collecting, yes, they are fidelity data, but they're going to help us know what else we have to do to be able to put these practices in place, or if it's even feasible to be able to put these practices in place, or what else we need to be able to have in place to make this work. Fidelity data is about feasibility, not evaluation. Fidelity is about feasibility, not evaluation. I would say it over and over and over again, and I hope that you will be able to convey that because fidelity data is critical to all of our decision making. And yet, what I'm hearing and seeing is that a lot of people are just clicking a checklist saying yes, 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 because they don't want it to be going against them in some way, or they're not collecting it. The function of fidelity data is to help us know how better to create the right environment, the right system of supports to be able to use a practice or a program so that we can get those outcomes. Our children need this. It helps us in problem solving and evaluating what we need to do for our next steps. Share the wealth, share that out there So I'm talking as though you have all these wonderful resources and tools and checklists and observations to be able to get an index or measure of how well a practice or a program has been able to be infused or used in an environment. What happens if you don't? Where are you then? I'm going to talk about what you can do to help set yourself up for kind of like a gateway fidelity tool, a proxy until one can be fully fleshed out. In the meantime, though, what I want you to be able to do is pull up your program or your practice. Get into the trenches of it. Pull up the research article, pull up the manual, write to the publisher, and ask these questions. What are the critical pieces that have to be in place for this program to be this program and to get these outcomes? What are the essential components that make this practice or this program so critical? Is it because we teach the behaviors that are expected and we reinforce the use of those behaviors? Is it because we explicitly model a certain strategy for a child? What are those critical pieces? I like to always use the reference point. What is the critical piece, the essential component of a chocolate chip cookie? I can think of one of them, a chocolate chip. If you hand me a cookie without a chocolate chip in it, it is not a chocolate chip cookie. It's a cookie. It might be a sugar cookie, but it's not a chocolate chip cookie. I need chocolate chips in my cookie to be a chocolate chip cookie. You may be able to also put in there some slightly different variations, right? Maybe you also like to put some nuts in there. If there's chocolate chips in there, it can still be a chocolate chip cookie with some nuts in there. It just has a little bit extra spice. You could also substitute some of the ingredients. So maybe you don't use sugar, you use an artificial sweetener. Maybe you use some honey. Maybe you use a different type of flour. But you're all going to have the same pieces to make the function of it being a beautifully shaped and wonderful, sweet tasting cookie with chocolate chips. Those are essential components there. You cannot miss out on the essential components. So, what are the chocolate chips in your practice or your program? What are the nuts? What are the pieces that you could add in but aren't essential, but maybe help contextually make a practice or program a little bit more suitable for your context? But what are the essential pieces? What are the chocolate chips? And then what are the other pieces of the degrees of freedom we have for being able to use that? Typically, if that's not already fleshed out, and a lot of our practices do already have that well defined, we can look up, for example, check in, check out. We have a beautiful article that talks about the essential components. We can look at some of our explicit literacy programs, and we know what are the essential components. Positive behavior interventions and support, we know what the essential components are. Now, a lot of these tools already have fidelity tools, but the idea here is if we define what those essential pieces are and what they would look like when being used so behaviorally, we then, as school psychologists, remember, or counselors, or people who had that knowledge of how to observe behavior, we then know what to look for when we go in to see a practice being used, or what behaviors to put on a checklist if we're forming a self-report to be able to have there for people to be able to say, okay, well, when I taught this social skills instruction, I also know that modeling and rehearsal are very important. Did I do both of those? Those are essential components of social skills instruction. Did I model? Then did I have a rehearsal with the students practicing and going through the role plays? Yes, yes. Oops, you know what I didn't do was link that back to why that is so critical or important and how that might look in other settings. I skipped that, but maybe that's also because I didn't quite have enough time to be able to have that. I didn't have great examples. The idea here is what are those key pieces that need to be there, and you flesh that out. You start thinking about that. It doesn't have to be fancy, but you know what to look for. So when you go to do an observation or you ask someone to complete a checklist, they know what they're also supposed to be looking for and what they're supposed to be doing. That will be a proxy until you can have more information or until a fidelity checklist is then established. Don't use that for quantitative, use that for information to get back at the key point that I talked about for fidelity. Fidelity tells us whether something is feasible to be done. Fidelity tells us whether all those pieces were done so we can better interpret the outcomes. If we didn't get the outcomes, was it because these essential components, these essential pieces were not used as intended, or because they were used, we didn't get the outcomes? We have a different way of thinking and problem solving on the next steps at that point. So think about it. Fidelity, is it feasible? And then think about how that links then to our outcomes. If you don't have fidelity data, fidelity checklist ways to be able to capture that, then think about what are the essential pieces that have to be there. How might those look? And how might those be observed, or for someone to do self-reflection upon the idea of, did I do this, this, and this? And information to help us better support our students.